Chapter 18 of Tilda Jane's Orphans. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gloria Begeman, Somerville, South Carolina. Tilda Jane's Orphans by Marshall Saunders. Chapter 18. Perletta's Pets. One charming spring day, charming overhead, but unspeakably muddy underfoot, Tilda Jane and Hank had been for a drive. He was teaching her how to guide milkweed, and often, after school hours, Perletta, who was as good as a man about the stable, on account of her strength, would harness Milkweed, and Tilda Jane would drive down to the mill to bring Hank home. On this particular day they had had a short, enjoyable spin into the country, and now he stood grooming Milkweed in the sunny yard. He did not mind the mud, for he had on high rubber boots, nor did his beautiful mare dislike it. She stood on her long legs, twitching her tail occasionally, and very often mouthing affectionately Hank's hands or shoulders. "Now come over here," he said, leading the way to a low wooden platform, "till I see about those legs and hoofs. I've gone over your back and sides pretty well." She followed him obediently, then turned her head in the direction of the house. "Who's coming?" said Hank. "Oh, Tilda. What do you want, sissy?" Tilda Jane had not taken off her coat and hat, and her expression was so dubious that Hank paused in his work and stood staring at her, his brush in one hand, the currycomb in the other. "Your face is queer," he said penetratingly. "You seem kind of interested and sorry and frightened of what I'll say. 'Pon my word, you look just like those dear sweet women who come round the mill collecting about every other day in the week. Gentlemen, for the love of charity, won't you give us something for the Home for Aged Men and Women, or the new tower on the City Hall, or the monument being erected to our worthy townsman who so ably represented his native state in the halls of legislature, or the new library for the scientific souls of the town, or the repairing of the old road out to the cemetery. Now, Tilda, I don't care a rap for the cemetery, or science, or halls of legislature, or monuments, or old men and women. Get in the house with you and let me finish my work." "Hank," said 'Tilda Jane imploringly, and stepping a little nearer to him. "You haven't rubbers on, and the yard is muddy," said Hank feebly. Still, 'Tilda Jane did not pay any attention to him. "What under the sun is in the girl's mind?" he said desperately. "There she is, sinking ankle deep into soft State of Maine mud, which I am proud to say is ahead of any other mud in the world. Oh, despair and condemnation!" he exclaimed suddenly, clapping his hands to his pockets. "She wants something for herself, and I haven't got any money to lend her. And I won't do her any favors. Go 'way, sissy." "Hank," said the little girl pleadingly, "don't be gay. Please listen. You remember when Perletta came home 3 weeks ago?" "I remember nothing about Perletta," said Hank stubbornly, for it was one of his pleasant fictions to treat Perletta as a thing of the past. "I remember hiring a new girl 3 weeks ago of the same name." "Well, the new girl then," said 'Tilda Jane in a low voice. "By the way, where is she?" asked Hank, looking over his shoulder. "She's a powerful listener. I sent her to town for more tea. She forgot to tell me we were out of it." "Well, Hank dear, you admit that Perletta has been pretty good the last 3 weeks." "The new girl has behaved herself with some decency," Hank admitted reluctantly. Don't praise her or she'll shy. A week ago she asked me if we would mind if she had a little pet of her own," continued 'Tilda Jane. "I thought by the way she spoke she meant a canary, and I said I didn't think you'd mind. She said it would make her feel more contented, that you had Milkweed and the cow, and I had the hens and the pigeons and sparrows and the dogs, and Grandpa had the pup, and she had nothing." "Poor neglected creature," said Hank ironically. "I forgot to speak to you about it," said 'Tilda Jane. "I didn't think much of it, but do you know just now when I came home she told me she got not one pet, but two." "She had she?" remarked Hank. "2 birds in a cage?" "They're not birds exactly," said the little girl. "But oh, Hank, I hope you'll let her keep them. Her face was just lovely as she bent over them." "Where are they?" "In the wood house." "I'll go see them," said Hank promptly. "Wait a bit, brother," said 'Tilda Jane, laying a hand on his arm. "You know Perletta, our new girl, is queer, but she is beautiful with children or animals." "Is she?" said Hank. "That's nothing to her credit. Most women are." "But Hank, she's so odd in other ways. This seems to make her catch up to the nice people who are smooth and even to get on with. You know, Mrs. Melangon has a new baby." "Really, that woman is incorrigible," remarked Hank, lifting his face to the sky. "This must be the 50th." "It's only the 10th," said 'Tilda Jane indignantly. "Well, when Perletta and I went in to see the little new thing a few days ago, her face was just like an angel's when she looked at it." "I wish I'd been there," said Hank enthusiastically. "Now," continued 'Tilda Jane, "when Perletta bent over the tub where her new pets are, her face looked just the same way that it did when she saw the baby." "Tub?" exclaimed Hank. "Are they fish?" "No," said the little girl with a sigh. "I wish they were." "Lobsters," pursued Hank. "Crabs, shrimps, jellyfish, turtles, sea lions, seals, porpoises." "Oh, stop, stop," said 'Tilda Jane imploringly. "Do be sober." "I can't," replied Hank hilariously. "The spring's in my blood, and I'm in good health, and I haven't got any debts. All on board for the fast express for the house, on an excursion to see the hobbledehoy's new pets," and seizing 'Tilda Jane by the hand, he rushed her to the back door. Half laughing, half disturbed, the little girl went with him. Far in the wood house, in the full light of the setting sun streaming in the window, was a large wash tub with a bit of wire netting laid across it, and, on top of the netting, a heavy stick of wood. Hank fell back in pretended dismay. "Is it a bear, 'Tilda?" he whispered. "No, no," she said hysterically. "Now, Hank, be prepared. Don't laugh or scream, you'll make me nervous." Hank paid no attention to her. With as many antics as a schoolboy, he alternately advanced and retreated, touched the end of the stick of wood with timid fingers, scuttled back if it moved, and finally, with a great effort, and stiffening his rotund figure, he marched up, removed stick and screen, and stood right over the tub. In spite of 'Tilda Jane's warnings, he gave one loud yell of delight when he saw what was inside, and then raced out the back door and round the house, roaring at intervals. "I thought I was 25, I'm only 15. I made a boy again just for tonight. Oh, pigs, pigs, pigs in clover." 'Tilda Jane stood in the doorway, laughing convulsively. Then she grew anxious. As Hank tore round and round the house in his long rubber boots, the mud splashing almost to his neck. The sociable milkweed who loved to be with human beings, and who was herself young and somewhat foolish, and also full of play, took to galloping after him, and Poacher, witnessing the commotion, ran from the stable, and not to be behindhand in any family rejoicing, leaped and bounded beside Hank. Grandpa, hearing the noise in the yard, hobbled to the back door, and the pup, breaking away from him, joined the chase, coming in at the tail of it, and, unlike the serious Poacher, who did not open his mouth, the little aristocrat, for the second time in his young life, gave utterance to shrill and wildly joyful yelps. "Stop, sir, I say," called Grandpa to his son, who was now taking in the barn as well as the house in his wide circles. "Stop this, I say. It's disgraceful to see a grown man with a horse and dogs chasing him. Hold up, will you?" And he shook a crutch at him. "If that mare stumbles, the pup will be right under her hoofs. And look at the mud she's dashing on herself. And you, fresh from grooming her, you're all crazy. I never saw such a sight. Tilda Jane, get that pup, will you? He'll catch cold. See, he's as dirty as a pig already." "Hank," squealed 'Tilda Jane in her piercing young voice, "do stop. Grandpa's getting scared." She timed this information just as Hank came round the corner of the barn by the henhouse, and, with a comprehensive glance, he took in the family party and abruptly wheeled into the stable door, followed by Milkweed and the dogs. 'Tilda Jane hurried after him, rescued the struggling, dripping Handy Andy, and carried him into the kitchen, where he speedily had a bath by the fire. Hank came in a short time later, calm and in his right mind. "You're getting rather too old to play the fool," said Grandpa sarcastically. "Have you seen Perletta's pets, sir?" inquired Hank with a wink at 'Tilda Jane. "Perletta? Who's Perletta? Oh, the girl," said Grandpa fretfully, and with a sudden fit of deafness. "I don't know anything about her. I can't hear you. Don't talk to me." Ever since the return of the wayward girl, Grandpa had steadily ignored her. He never addressed her, and if she spoke to him, he did not answer her. If he wished anything he could not get himself, he waited until 'Tilda Jane or Hank could come to him. This was his punishment for her running away. By and by, he would restore her to favor, but there was no hurry about it. Hank, seeing his father was in no humor for talking, crept out to the woodhouse, where 'Tilda Jane followed him. He had once again removed the stick of wood and the netting that 'Tilda Jane had replaced, and stood staring down at the two tiny pink and white pigs lying on sweet clover hay. He was shaking with silent laughter, but presently he controlled himself enough to say, "Where did she get them?" "You know, Perletta often goes among the French people," the little girl replied, "and old Farmer Thibodeau's wife told her she might have these two young pigs if she cared to bring them up. The old mother had too big a litter to take care of." "Are they hard to raise, Hank?" "Law, no. I've often seen the farmers' wives in the country with them. There's no trick about bringing them up, but they take time like all young things fed by hand. You've got to attend to them several times a day, and once or twice in the night when they are as young as this. They ain't too bad looking when they're young, are they?" "I think they're cute," said 'Tilda Jane. "They're so small and clean looking, and so quiet." "Wait a bit," replied Hank with an explosive chuckle. "Wait a bit before you talk of quietness. How is the new girl going to feed them?" "She's going to buy a baby's nursing bottle while she's downtown. Mrs. Thibodeau told her she could feed them with a spoon, but the bottle is easier. Here she is now." At that instant, Perletta, red-faced and out of breath, entered the back door, holding 2 parcels tightly in her hands. With pleading looks she scanned Hank's face. There was a pleasant, protecting expression in her eyes, quite different from the sullen one she usually exhibited, and the young man, who at heart was truly kind and appreciative of any effort at reform, gave a slight nod and, turning on his heel, re-entered the kitchen. Grampa, when he saw Perletta coming, hitched himself into the dining room, and the girl bustled round the room, taking off her wraps and then hurrying to wash the bottle and fill it with milk and water with a dash of molasses. "Can I feed the boys afore I gets the supper?" she said civilly to 'Tilda Jane. The little girl smiled assent and started preparations for the meal herself. Perletta, clasping the warm bottle, ran to the woodhouse, hurriedly took one of the little pigs from the tub, and put the bottle to his mouth. He seized the rubber mouthpiece with avidity, and with as much ease as if he had always been accustomed to get his food in this way. After pulling away at it for a few seconds, he would stop and violently knead Perletta's knuckles with his tiny snout. Meantime, his little brother awoke, and discovered by nosing about the hay that he had been deprived of his companion. Listening intently, he heard sounds of enjoyment above. With great intelligence he concluded that feeding time was going on without him, and he uplifted his baby voice in a succession of ear-piercing yells. 'Tilda Jane ran to shut the door into the kitchen, but the mischief had been done. Grampa, dozing by the dining room fire, had sprung from his chair and, his deafness forgotten, was calling frantically to Hank to know who was being killed. "Come and see, sir," said Hank, and taking him by the arm, he led him to the woodhouse door. There sat Perletta, confused by the din, and yet comforted by the thought that she was in the pursuit of her duty. But for her, these young things might starve to death. "Try the other one," shouted Hank in the midst of the uproar. "Diogenes of the tub is jealous." Perletta, immensely flattered to think that Hank had permitted her to keep her pets, and that he was beginning to take an interest in them at once, dropped the pig on her lap to the tub, and lifted out his brother. Now she had given offense in another direction. The dropped pig knew the sweets of the bottle, while the other had only guessed at them, and he yelled much more loudly than his brother had done. "Pigs," spluttered Grampa, "pigs in my house? Have I sunk as low as that? Are we going to have troughs in the dining room?" "No, sir," bawled Hank consolingly. "Not a bit of it. Just wait till these fellas are a trifle older, and we'll clear them out to the barn." The old man saw that his son's mind was made up to keep the little creatures, so he wisely did not protest, but went back to his seat and sat till supper time, muttering, "Pigs, pigs, I didn't think I'd come to this." Perletta was in a 7th heaven of delight. Now, at last, she had something of her own to care for, and day by day and night by night, she fed the young and growing creatures at stated intervals. "She's pretty good, too," 'Tilda Jane said to Hank. "No matter how cold it is, she gets up twice every night and heats some milk for them." "Tell her to get up only once a night," said Hank commandingly. "That's enough now." 'Tilda Jane did as she was told, but the first night the order went into effect, they were all awakened at midnight by a terrible noise and heartrending yells from the kitchen and staircase. Perletta had inadvertently left the woodhouse door ajar, and when she did not appear at the first of her accustomed times, the two pigs, by their united efforts, succeeded in forcing the cover off the tub, and had come into the kitchen, where they were trying to get up the staircase in search of their guardian and protector. Their shrieks of dismay and anger as they tried to mount the steps and fell backward were enough not only to alarm the house, but the neighborhood. Grandpa, whose room was near the staircase, was almost crazy. His pup had waked up and was screaming and barking with fright. Poacher and even deaf Gippy, who had also been disturbed in their slumbers, had sprung up, and the half-blind and lame Gippy kept getting in the way of the pigs, receiving pushing blows with their young snouts that made him call out in wrath. He, whose old age usually saved him from punishment from anyone, while good, faithful Poacher, taking the part of a sheepdog, was trying to herd the unruly members of the household back to their appointed place. "Catch them!" shouted Grandpa hoarsely. "Catch the evil things, Hank! Tilda, where are you? Don't you hear the noise? The pup has most lost his senses. There he goes, out of the bed. Those wild hogs will kill him. Hand me my crutches, someone. Oh, that viper, why did I let her back in my house?" The pigs would neither be led nor driven by Poacher, and not until Hank, 'Tilda Jane, and Perletta appeared on the scene could they be controlled in any way. Hank arrived first, but he could do nothing single-handed, for as fast as he cornered them, they would run under his arms. His candle went out, and choking and spluttering with laughter, for he could not for his life help seeing the amusing side of the situation. He had to search for a lamp, and grope for matches, trying meanwhile to calm his father. "The pup's all right, Dad. I hear him squealing under the stove. The boys didn't hurt him, merely gave him a push or two. Wait a bit till I get the matches. As soon as night comes, every match in this house grows another leg and dances away into a corner. I never can find any. There, now I have a light. Hold on till I set it up on a shelf, out of the way of the boys. Perletta," he bawled up the stairway, "can't you earthquake yourself downstairs and catch these pink and white posies of yours? You understand them better than anybody." In a few seconds Perletta and 'Tilda Jane came clattering down the steps, and together they managed to seize the pigs and carry them to their home in the tub, and also to pacify the disturbed dogs. The puppy's eyes under the stove looked green with fright and anger, and when they tried to catch him, he bolted into Grandpa's room and sprang on the bed where he lay trembling. "Go away," cried Grandpa. "Leave us alone and put those hogs out of doors." "All right, Dad," said Hank, who was standing looking at him, shading the light with his hand. "Go to sleep now. Those boys shall go right out to the barn. Perletta," he called, "where are you?" "Here, sir," she replied, appearing in the woodhouse door, her disheveled hair almost standing on end with fright and worry. "We've got to put those pigs in the barn," said Hank. "Tilda, you light the lantern, and we'll move the tub." A queer procession wound out of doors, and as they went, Hank said to Perletta, "These fellows are getting to be a good size. You feed them after this late at night, and first thing in the morning I'm not going to have you coming out here in my barn in the middle of the night with a lantern. First thing you know, one of these rowdies will knock it over, and then we shall have a fire." Perletta's face fell, but she uttered a meek, "Yes, sir," and 'Tilda Jane hastened to say, "I'll come out with you every night before we go to bed. I think it is lovely in you to be so merciful to these bothersome little things." "It's what you do yourself," said Perletta bluntly. "You gets up in the dead of the night if a dog or a bird wants anythin'." "Yes," replied 'Tilda Jane softly, "but somehow or other it seems more blessed to do things for pigs than other creatures." Hank smirked at the occupants of the tub as he set it down in a corner of his harness room. "That's so, 'Tilda, and there's more merit in doing things for human pigs than for angelic humans. Now, Perletta, you keep your boys in this little room. There's a button on the door, and no one will come in. Father's an old man, and I don't want him bothered with these things in the house." "Sir," cried Perletta in dismay as a sudden thought struck her, "you ain't a-goin' to make me send 'em away when they're bigger, be you?" 'Tilda Jane swung the lantern round so that she could see the face of her adopted brother. Hank was fond of fun, and was disposed to be frivolous at times, but there was a strong undercurrent of sense in his disposition, and just now, as he threw a glance at their unprepossessing maid, and then looked beyond her out through the barn door at the bright solemn beauty of the sky, his face was aglow with kind and manly feeling. "Perletta," he said slowly, "I believe in a power away up there behind the stars that made all things, even the flies that you brush from your kitchen. I hate to see a critter hungry or cold or sad or neglected. I believe the good Lord made even pigs, and I'm going to stand by these fellas if they don't get too obstreperous. By and by, when they're older, I'll make them a good warm house in the corner of the yard. Every animal ought to have his own bed and board, and pigs ain't dirty. They're as clean as anyone. It's dirty people that don't keep them clean that give pigs their bad name." "And you'll never kill 'em, sir? Oh, say you'll never kill 'em," cried Perletta, clasping her big hands in frantic appeal. Hank scratched his tousled head. "Let's leave that problem to the future. Pigs get to be powerful big, but I'm something like the Irishman who always kept the same pig. He said he'd got to have one, and he didn't believe in being fickle. I promise you, Perletta, that nothing will be done to these young fellas without your permission." Perletta gasped excited thanks. Then as Hank and 'Tilda Jane walked to the house, she lingered an instant to tuck her pets in their hay and give them a last caress. "'Tilda," said Hank in a low voice, "I prophesy that in a few weeks we'll have 2 promising young hogs running about these premises with blue ribbons round their necks." End of chapter 18.